2011, 2012, very, very difficult time for us, right? Because we'd kind of been working on this thing. It was growing really fast, and it was almost like the money was flowing, right? And it wasn't big money, right? But to us, at that point in time, it felt like a proper business, right? YouTube were paying us. We were getting advertising money from the website. And then literally overnight, it was the plug was pulled, right? And we had no idea why, to be honest.
So Matt, it is an honor to have you on the platform. You are one of the co-founders of GRM Daily. For those of in my audience that might not know, that's Grime Music Daily. And you've also started a company called Reboxed. So
yeah, that's me. Thank you very much for having me.
So I'd like to ask, because you're actually one of the co-founders of Grime Music Daily. A lot of people think of Stormzy, they'll think of Kojo Funds, they'll think of all of these big artists, but Grime Music Daily was behind the heart of that. So please tell me about how you started that platform and why you started it.
So originally it was Grime Daily, as a lot of people that know it will know. And then in 2012, we did a bit of a rebrand to incorporate some more of the rap music that we were featuring. So then it became GRM, Grime and Rap Music Daily. And I guess if we're going back to the very beginning, I was a huge fan of grime music from from school days. Didn't live in London, but I was kind of working within the whole MySpace movement of artists. And through that, I met two guys, Posty and Pierre, who were coming to me for mixtape covers, the usual kind of MySpace and mixtape cover things as two artists that they were. And they came to me with an idea to do, I guess, the UK World Star Hip Hop, but World Star Grime, I think, was the original name that was thrown between the two of us. And look, I was somebody that lived on the blogs and felt that there was a gap for something very similar. So when the three of us came together and we were fleshing out this idea, it felt like a natural thing to get involved as someone that was super passionate about it. So yeah, I got involved then, and we just started posting stuff on the website. Realized really quickly on that there wasn't enough content, so we had to go out and start shooting content. So me, who was not based in London and was more on the digital side and the branding side, I was taking care of that, while the other two guys were running around making content and making stuff happen with the artists.
And following on from that, when you started the platform, what were some of the barriers you experienced? Because grime wasn't as big then as it is now.
I guess barrier-wise, it was early on in terms of internet video, so we'd kind of transitioned from the DVD era into online music. Not a lot of people were used to consuming this kind of online, certainly on YouTube. But I think the biggest barrier for us starting the business was really kind of the website side of things. And really early on, what happened was Posty was literally hammering everyone on Facebook, posting them links to the website. And what we figured out was that it was really difficult to have lots of traffic on a website. And it felt at the time like an overnight success, because we went from nothing to a website that was getting thousands of hits each day. And basically the architecture of how we set up the website at that point just couldn't handle that much traffic, so it kept crashing all the time. So I think really the barrier for us then was more of a technical barrier, and actually keeping the website online and the demand for views alive.
Thank you. And in 2011, the Grime Daily music platform was removed off YouTube. How did you bounce back from that, and why was it originally shut down?
So 2011, 2012, very, very difficult time for us, right? Because we'd kind of been working on this thing. It was growing really fast, and it was almost like the money was flowing, right? And it wasn't big money, right? But to us, at that point in time, it felt like a proper business, right? YouTube were paying us. We were getting advertising money from the website. And then literally overnight, it was the plug was pulled, right? And we had no idea why, to be honest. There was lots of rumors about this video, that video, SB, but none of them were really true. And actually, it took us a long time to get through to our YouTube manager. And what it came down to was a copyright strike from a random event that we got paid to shoot, where there was a bunch of comedians on there, and not all of them had signed the waiver that you needed. And one of them was able to pull the video and, essentially do a strike on the account. Now, there's a few other things in there as well. We didn't have 3 strikes on the account. I think we had 2. So we didn't really know why it was actually pulled and why we couldn't get it back. But ultimately, it was gone, and there was not a lot we can do about it. So we went on a bit of a journey from that point. I guess it felt like overnight that the business was dead, right? Because 90% of the money that was paying to keep the website up, paying people to write content, film, was just gone. And what we decided to do, which later turned out to be a bit of a naive mistake, was we decided to host the video ourselves on our website. And the idea behind that was if we hosted the video ourselves, we could control the advertising coming through the player. So we partnered up with this company that did this, right? Did video players and advertising. And yeah, it made the money to run the platform, but we just didn't realize how demanding that would be and how much money it would cost to actually just run the player and run all the impressions. So we decided that we'd keep doing that, but we had to grow the business up. And that's when we turned it, I guess, into a bit more of a business. We started looking at advertising deals with proper advertising networks and really the content branded deals that would actually start bringing the money in to sustain the business while we launched a new YouTube channel and started getting that money back up. So really it was a pivotal point for us to grow up the business, but we made it up as we went along, and we made the mistakes to go with it, so to speak.
Well, that's really, really interesting. And another incredible thing about you is that you started the company Disrupt Marketing and signed, an icon in British rap music, Ghetts. So at what stage did you realize that Ghetts had the potential to become a force within UK rap? And how did you start Disrupt Marketing?
So Disrupt was a weird one, right? So we actually started off the back of GRM with like an agency that we were running, which was essentially helping to facilitate a lot of the brand deals. And that agency was called Big. We had a bunch of issues with that, and then we decided to not do the agency thing anymore. And obviously I was in and around the music scene at that particular time. Ghetts was like one of my all-time favorite artists. And I met him at a video shoot, and we were having a chat about what he was doing with his music and like getting signed and stuff. And it was quite clear that he was having challenges. And my view was, with Ghetts, there was just a super brand waiting to happen. So I pitched him this idea to help him with his album. At that point, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what vehicle it was. I didn't know whether it was Disrupt or not. And he was like, look, you can help me raise the money to sign the album and to like build the campaign and stuff. I was like, yeah, cool. I'm in. Like, it's my favorite artist. This is what I wanted to do. And we decided to call that Disrupt, right? Because we were approaching things a little bit differently. We weren't trying to be a label. We didn't know what we were trying to be, but we knew that there was like something in this kind of cultural marketing music thing. And essentially we started Disrupt, did a deal with Ghetts to sign the album Rebel with a Cause. And it was kind of like a JV or a 360, a little bit different to a traditional label. And that was it. I sat with him. He had like literally 200 songs on a hard drive. And the challenge was, how do we get 200 songs? I mean, this guy was in the studio every day. Like, he's an absolute beast. The challenge was to get 200 songs down to an album and to build a campaign around it. He had the title, and yeah, I guess we got a bit of funding to start it, and it was like a tiny amount of funding. We did the most incredible campaign on literally next to no money in the hardest of times when I guess no one was getting signed for grime. Like, this whole thing was essentially dead. But we just knew that with the right kind of, I guess, marketing, positioning, that Ghetts would be able to do it. And that's what we did. And I think it was really successful, right? We did a top, I think it was 23 the album peaked at. And again, I think what happened after Ghetts, which is the thing I look back on fondly, is all these artists came through the door afterwards, right? Radio transitioned into online. People like Stormzy came through. And I think what we did with Ghetts is non-commercial sound was redefine what music could get through. And yeah, like, it was a pretty big achievement and obviously an awesome project.
It's interesting because Rebel with a Cause, as you've said, it had a massive impact in British music. How did you put the album together? So Ghetts has recorded 200 songs. How did you pick which ones would, meet the needs of, the mainstream market, as it were?
Well, I think, look, Ghetts is an intense musical genius, right? So he already knew what his favorite songs were. There was probably 3 or 4 on there that I was like, if we reproduce these like this, then these would be really good. And luckily for me, he took a bit of that on and re-recorded it. But essentially, we found these 2 guys that did advertising music, right? And they had a little canal boat in Camden. And I'm not joking, the studio was on a canal boat. And we basically spent 3 months on this canal boat, re-recording the best songs and reproducing them with a slightly different sound, which would then, become the body of work. And yeah, I mean, you kind of have a creative flow and you just know. And when everything sounds a certain way and it comes together, it just felt like it came together. And obviously, as I said, just Ghetts being the musical genius he was able to pull the whole thing together from that kind of initial direction. Once we had the name, like the branding, like you almost knew what music needed to be produced to kind of sit inside that box, and it all came together like that.
And how did you market it? Because back when Ghetts started, Grime was not getting mainstream airtime. So how did you market it to make sure that album could become as successful as it was?
Look, Ghetts is a very established artist, right? So it didn't take a lot for people to understand that, his core fan base get a sniff of that music and would be into it. But obviously we use GRM quite heavily, like the channel. Probably pretty much exclusively GRM, apart from like a couple of things on SB and here and there. But look, we just did what we felt was right at the time, which was make some really interesting content. We did things like the Cypher with his 3 different alter egos. We did a couple of creative things. We used the website, and we tried to do some more of the kind of traditional, PR and marketing, which, had it was a mixed bag of success, really. Like radio was very difficult. They still weren't really playing this type of music, but the PR was pretty good. And I guess it was probably more traditional than what you typically do today. Obviously, we didn't have things like TikTok, back then. So I guess, those channels were immensely important, but the strength of his core fan base was there, right? It's the nucleus that any artist needs right now, is to have a solid group of fans. Because if you have 1,000 people that buy into your brand, and willing to spend £100, whether that's your CD, whether that's coming to a gig or vinyl, then, that is a very sustainable starting point for making a living. And luckily Ghetts had more than 1,000 core fans. But yeah, we did a lot of touring gigs and stuff like that as well. So that was pretty much it.
And as one of the 3 co-founders of GMR Daily, what are some of your best memories during your time there?
We had so many good memories, man. Like, video shoots, eating good dinners, going to the BET Music Awards together, hanging around in LA with like some ridiculous artists. We had a lot of good times. Hard to think on the spot about anyone particularly, but yeah, I think going to America as like a group of guys in a industry which no one really knew about, like Grime, and having some of those experiences are pretty unforgettable.
And you actually sold Disrupt Marketing. So was it ever difficult for you to sell brands in which you started?
So it's an interesting question. So I guess once we realized that running a label was very difficult, we decided to focus on what I guess was our core strength, which was kind of brand marketing. And that's where we transitioned from Disrupt as a label into the marketing agency. And then at that point, it was a lifestyle business. And to be honest with you, like, I never really personally wanted to run an agency. I was interested in the brand building and like actually doing the projects. And one of the biggest projects I guess we did at Disrupt was the Rated Awards, which is a partnership between GRM and KA. And essentially that became like another business and probably the hero client at that time. And, I just realized how difficult and how unmotivated I was about working for brands. So the only thing that I could see to do was to kind of build it and grow it to kind of sell it so I could move on and do some other things with the skills that I've learned. So, luckily off the back of kind of KA and those things, we were able to win some really good clients like Absolute Vodka, a bunch of other audio brands. And it basically took the agency into kind of a different space. And that's a space I didn't necessarily enjoy. We worked with a lot of YouTubers, which I did enjoy. But when we doubled down and started focusing on influencer marketing, it was clear that we had, something unique that we could sell to somebody else who was in the kind of agency space. So we focused for a year and then did that ultimately. So I guess the answer to the question is no, it wasn't difficult to do, but that was largely because it was a happy accident and something I wasn't really trying to do. But, the agency still goes today. It's quite successful. Have an affinity to the brand. I feel like we could have kept that brand and done something else with it. But, you live and learn and you move on, right?
And thank you for that. And as a successful entrepreneur, you've, co-founded 3 very successful companies. Reboxed is also going to be a very, very big brand in the years to come. What advice would you give to a young entrepreneur that's starting off their business and they want to become successful in that area?
I guess my biggest learning is focus. Obviously, I've done a lot of different things, but focusing on one thing at a time and going all in on it is definitely something that I've learned is valuable. Like when we decided to go all in on the agency and just focus on that, we were able to make that a success. So I guess that's the kind of first thing. And the other thing is, jumping around industries is a challenge. I don't think it's a bad thing or a good thing. I guess, if I look at my time now and I spent more time kind of in the culture or the original kind of music, that plant would have grown into a tree. I'm absolutely sure of it. I don't think that was the right path for me personally, but I think it's really important to kind of stick into an area and compound interest in an area which you are kind of known and know, essentially.
Thank you. And the Daily Mail released an article that they said that a lot of gang murders are linked to drill music. What are your thoughts on this?
I think you kind of got to be careful with statistics. I think that article said it was like 25% or a quarter. You've got to be careful with statistics, right? Because they can be used manipulatively to drive an agenda. And I think that article specifically is interesting. But when you actually look at drill music, you've got these young groups of people that have a lot of friends, right? So you might have one artist with 20, 30 friends in the video. Of course, if you pull all those people together and you look at and you overlay some of the instances that have happened, then there's obviously going to be some crossover, no doubt about it. I don't think it's necessarily intrinsically linked specifically to the music, but obviously there is a lot of crossover. But I think if you look at it the other way, obviously the music is an opportunity for people to make it out of those circumstances. And I guess culturally things have just changed, right? There's no difference between rap and hip hop and all of the different, even early grime, there's a lot of, street culture talked about in the music. I think the music just has manifested lyrically in a different way now. Possibly not for the best, but, it is an expression of, the culture that people live in each day. And I think the thing is wider than just music, right? It's culture and how they cross over.
Thank you. And one thing that's really interesting about you is that you've shifted from music to Reboxed. So please tell us a bit about Reboxed and why did you make that change?
So look, I've kind of been a designer for, since I left university, and I've always bought the latest Apple products, always bought the latest tech. And I guess when we were building our agency and scaling that, there was one thing I didn't want to do, which was buy new tech for all the people that joined, right? Because that shit's expensive. So we decided to do different things, right? We started leasing products and we started buying refurbished. And it was just instant to me that there was an opportunity to make that experience better. I used to buy and sell stuff all the time, so I'd always flip my things on Gumtree, like my phones every year, and try and make the most money out of it, kind of in an entrepreneurial way. So I think it was a bit of a happy accident, right? I love tech, and I think there's an opportunity to create a brand in a space which didn't really exist. There was no kind of leading brand operating in this space, so it just felt coincidental and natural for me to to give it a go. I didn't think it would last as long as it has done, to be honest. It felt like an idea, and now it's spiraled into quite a big, complicated business. But I guess, that's kind of what happens. And luckily, we've got a growing demand and a growing market for this type of thing. So much like GRM back in 2009, it feels like the right place and the right time. And we're currently riding that wave until we have to get off the board, so to speak.
And following on from that, it was announced that Reboxed had raised 1.6 million in 2023. Why do you think there is such an opportunity for sustainable businesses in this current climate?
Look, I think the two things that are apparent for us, and we came into this with like the whole kind of sustainability thing, understanding the e-waste and the carbon emissions that are produced through the manufacturing of these devices. We actually wrote like a 30-page white paper on the kind of rise of e-waste and where things were going in terms of sustainable manufacturing. But what we didn't see at the time, and this was 6 months after we launched, was this thing called COVID and the cost of living, right? And all of these things have come together. So I actually think the thing right now is, cost of living and the price of things, and then sustainability as well. And we're kind of in the middle of both of those. But from a sustainability point of view, obviously there's a lot of pressure on the government to meet the 2030 emissions targets. There's a lot of pressure on manufacturers to start being more responsible. And I guess those things and how companies consume, reducing their footprint, have all kind of come together to create a rise in sustainability focused businesses. But it does feel like there's a lot of tick boxing, and I guess for us it's about being more than just the sustainability. It's about offering value to people in both ways. So that's why I think we're in a unique position with Reboxed.
Thank you. And you've operated as an entrepreneur since 2009, so you've launched so many successful companies, had a big impact. If there was some advice you could give to your younger self, what would it be?
I think the first thing for me obviously goes back to the focus that I said before, but I think more importantly now, I wish I'd have just made more content around the time. Like, you can see that we're in like a creator and content economy today. If I'd have launched my own YouTube channel, 10, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, I would be so much further on. I'd have so much more power by having an audience. So I guess it's probably more obvious now to people to do content, and people are doing content a lot more natively than even I am. But I definitely think like documenting the journey and tracking all of your learning is a really important thing, because that is valuable to other people, and it's something that could sustain yourself as a business in the future. I'm really interested in the idea of solo entrepreneurship and how you can make a living just off of things like content and repurposing knowledge. And I guess that will probably be naturally my next evolution. But I would definitely say to anybody else, building a business is build an audience first, because once you've built that audience, then that audience can stick with you for life.
And another really interesting thing about you is that, if I'm correct, the same business partner you worked with in Disrupt Marketing is the same business partner you're working with for Reboxed?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Phil.
So please just tell us about your relationship with Phil and how you've managed to make your business relationship work for so long.
I think it's pretty similar to an actual relationship with a life partner, right? You have to listen, you have to make compromises, and you have to work together. And those things are challenging, right? Having a co-founder is challenging, but it's also rewarding, right? You have someone to bounce off of, somebody to do and fill in the gaps that you have, and vice versa. And I guess just wanting the same thing, being on the same page has been the thing that's really kept us together. And growing at the same time is also really important. Like, I guess in life with a woman, you have challenges, you have to grow together, and you might grow at different paths. I think the good thing about having a business partner is you should in theory grow along the same path, which makes it kind of easier, and that compounds over time, that relationship. So I think a mixture of those things really.
It's really interesting what you say there, because Rob Pear, the founder and former CEO of Jellyfish, said exactly the same thing as you. Like a business relationship is like a marriage.
Yeah, very much so. We've been together longer than the average marriage, apparently, as well. So yeah, we're doing something right.
And following on from that, what are your plans for Reeboks? Where do you envision it going? Where would you like it to be?
So I guess for us, we're still quite early in our journey. You never really know where it's going to go. I think there's going to be a part of what we do now, which is more kind of B2B2C focused. So more around the technology and how we take all the stuff that we've built for our own brand and help others utilize it. Probably won't go into that too much, but yeah, I guess using the strengths of how we built our brand to the consumers and adapting that for businesses so we can hit scale, whether that's leasing for businesses, whether that's just doing more of the kind of carbon tracking and the management of devices. I think there's a bigger play for how we grow and scale that without having to acquire individual consumers to buy tech.
And what have been some of your proudest achievements? If looking back over your career, if there were three things you could say, these are the three things I'm most proud of, what would they be?
I think seeing GRM where it is today, like 9 billion views, probably at 10 billion views now, like I'm immensely proud of that because I think the platform is just amazing. Like what we've been able to do with that and what it continues to do is awesome. Like it is single-handedly, I believe, spearheaded the culture and kept it alive and broke down the doors. So I think that is like one of my proudest achievements. You said three. Okay, three's tough. I guess, you know, being able to launch my own brand, Reboxed, whatever that does in the future, I think getting that to market, our first £1 million worth of sales for me was pretty epic. And then I guess kind of intertwined with the kind of GRM and the agency stuff was, you know, having a business exit, right? I mean, it's not like the world's biggest exit. It's not like we made, you know, 50, 100 million pounds from it, but being able to build a business that has value that can sell and actually going through that sales process was something that I'm proud of as well. Like it's a big achievement, and more importantly, you learn a lot about yourself and about business by going through the process of exiting one. So yeah, I guess those three for me are the things that stand out.
And a really cool thing about you is that you're like a branding whiz. You've designed so many brands for so many different companies. If I'm an entrepreneur, for example, and I have a good product but I have bad branding, how will that how do you think that can affect the company?
Well, branding is incredibly powerful, right? It is literally everything. It's not just about having a recognizable logo, a catchy slogan. It's about perceptions, right? It's about how people think and feel about your product or service. And I guess strong brands create loyalty, they create trust and a sense of community among consumers. And that only really happens in and around a good product. I believe there are ways of polishing a turd, so to speak, but I think ultimately the brand is not about how it looks, it's about how others perceive it. And that only really happens truly around a good product. It's not vice versa. You can make something look good and appear good, but ultimately the product itself has to really work intrinsically at its core. You know, effective branding can elevate a mediocre brand or product. You know, it can create desirability, exclusivity, authenticity, trust. But ultimately, if there are better options available, people will end up flocking to those. So you've got to have a good brand, and the brand only happens from the values and the core within.
Thank you. And I was actually reading a Guardian article not so long ago, and it talked about, you know, a rap lyric shouldn't land somebody in prison. What do you think has been the impact of UK rap music overall on British culture?
I think it's given it definitely an identity. I think it's clear that certainly urban music in general has had like a few years now where it has defined the era, and something that I felt was happening for a long time, right? There's like, kind of goes back to that punk era where the music and the culture kind of came together. I think we've We've just had that with UK music. Whether it continues or goes into the next cycle, I don't know, but it will definitely be back. But it has had a massive impact, right? I mean, you can hear it across the country in the way people dress, the way people talk, the attitudes and behaviours. But it all comes together from, the melting pot of society, culture, not just the music. But it has had a profound effect for sure.
And outside of being an entrepreneur, what are your hobbies? What do you enjoy doing?
I guess design. I whether it's architecture, like seeing architecture, design in my spare time, and then the other random one is aquascaping, which is something I do a lot. Again, linked to design, right? It's about creating aesthetics, underwater aesthetics, I would say, but that's probably something that I've spent the most time outside of kind of professional life doing most recently.
Thank you. And the last question I'd like to ask you is, please tell us about any projects you'll be working on over the next couple of years.
Currently fully focused, other than probably starting a little bit more aggressively content in and around what I'm doing with Reboxed. I guess it will just be Reboxed and content around Reboxed and design and repackaging up a lot of the learning value and experience that I've got along the way. So mainly YouTube channel, my own YouTube channel, and Reboxed, and how those two things will obviously interlink with each other.
And just for all of those who might not know what your YouTube channel is, I know what it is, but could you just tell my audience a little bit about your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is Sketchy Media. It's at the moment where I deep dive into all things branding. So I've got videos on there about our kind of end-to-end logo design process for Reboxed. I talk about the psychology of marketing and design, and the words that I use are the design of business, because I think every good business or brand has an element of design to it. And as a designer, I talk about the design things that underpin all of those things, and hopefully you can learn something along the way from there.
Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you. Thank you so much for coming onto the platform.
I appreciate that, Micah. Thank you so much.